It starts with movement. As young as infancy, babies have primitive reflexes, right? There's the rooting reflex where when you touch the side of their face, they're looking for something to eat. And these are ways that they survive. And we are restricting movement even as young as infancy in two ways. We're putting them in these contraptions, these smart bassinet type devices or contraptions to keep them what's considered safe, because convenience, parents are looking more for convenience these days, and they don't want to keep a close eye, and they don't want to rock their babies when they wake up. They want the bassinet to do it. And by restricting that movement, what's actually happening is their brain isn't developing. We've outsourced connection to our communities. We're more isolated. We're not as communal as we used to be. My sister-in-law came over and she was borrowing something, and it was kind of impromptu. She came over and she ended up staying for a while to visit. And as she was leaving, she said, "Do you remember when we were kids and we actually used to go visit people, and people actually used to come to your house and visit, and it was unannounced, and they would come in and you would welcome them and you would feed them?" And I said, "That's so funny you said that. I kind of did forget until you mentioned it."
Well, hello, moms, dads, and grands, and welcome back to M4L Academy. My name is Missy Karwowski, Director of Resources here. And if you're new here, I like to say that we're the school for parents, grandparents, and friends who are dedicated to fighting for the survival of America, with a special focus on topics that impact schools, kids' schools, and parental rights, of course. Now, I always say that I'm excited that you're with us because we have a great guest and we've got wonderful things to cover, because we do. However, I promise you I am particularly excited today because I feel like this topic, first of all, our guest has an amazing book that honestly speaks to every topic that Moms for Liberty prioritizes. So somehow she managed to summarize it all into one incredibly easy to read book that also finishes with true action items to help you as a parent take back some of the authority that we kind of feel like has maybe been stolen from us or wrestled away from us, or that we've just been told that we don't have anymore, as far as self-doubt. So without further ado, I'm incredibly excited to welcome Nicole Runyon, who is the author of Free to Fly. It is an incredible book that, again, talks about all the different topics. And today's conversation, we're going to center it around the idea of agency in advocacy. So taking back agency and parental responsibilities. So welcome to the program, Nicole.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we were joking that we're going to have like 2 hours to talk through this. And so as such, I'm going to jump right into it, because a lot of our viewers were able to see you on our all-member call, which I'm really excited about. But I want to start out, first of all, just reiterating how your book really summarizes truly all of the topics that we look at. I sort of feel like it's all wrapped up with the big bow, or the bow of big tech. That seems like the kind of through line on everything. But can you just unpack a little bit of what happened? How did we get to this place where parents seem to have now just abdicated our parental authority? Like, we don't trust ourselves anymore.
So I think that you're right. The underlying thread is big tech, but I think that ultimately tech is the symptom and not the problem. And the problem is what you mentioned, which parents have abdicated their role as authority, as expert to their own child. And essentially, I think what happened is we've been taken out of our instincts. I'm a parent myself, and I remember early on with my oldest, there was always this mentality that I didn't know enough, or I wasn't the expert, somebody else was, whether that was the doctor or the teacher, or in my field of therapy, we were being trained to think that we were the experts for children and not their parents. And essentially there was this mentality that we had to kick the parents out of the treatment room. And I think that we have this sort of cultural storm of all of us thinking that we're not enough, that we don't know enough, that we, again, are not the experts for our own kids. And so what's happened is we've trusted and we've outsourced so much connection. So we've outsourced connection to our communities. We're more isolated. We're not as communal as we used to be. And in fact, yesterday, this is reminding me of a story that happened yesterday. My sister-in-law came over and she was borrowing something, and it was kind of impromptu. She came over and she ended up staying for a while to visit. And as she was leaving, she said, "Do you remember when we were kids and we actually used to go visit people, and people actually used to like come to your house and visit, and it was unannounced, and they would come in and you would welcome them and you would feed them?" And I said, "That's so funny you said that. I kind of did forget until you mentioned it. Now I'm like thinking of all these memories of when I used to do that as a kid." And so I think that's really what's at the source of why we're experiencing the major issues we have with our kids.
That is, I think, absolutely correct. Oh my gosh, I was thinking about it while you're describing that. Of what do we do? What do I do in my house? And one thing, we love to host parties. We love to host people over, but we definitely in the last couple of years, I'd say, not since COVID specifically, like we've continued to host despite that, but we we've gotten busier, I would say. And so maybe got away from it because we were able to connect through technology. Connect, we think we're connecting. So maybe you feel like you're replacing it, but it just doesn't replace true connection. That's such an interesting observation and really sad.
Yeah.
But I think there's opportunities for improvement. So now we're going to go into this with there's a lot to cover, and some of our first time parents might feel a little overwhelmed. So what would you recommend for them to trust first as we're talking about all this advice? I guess what would be the first thing that they should consider?
I think that they need to understand that even if they make mistakes, their mistakes are survivable by their kids. And in fact, they're built to survive our mistakes. They are very resilient. And when I say mistakes, I don't mean traumatizing your kids. I don't mean abusing them, neglecting them, right? Those are mistakes that they don't survive and they end up having major issues from. But I mean, in terms of your parenting decisions, a parenting choice, not following through on a consequence or a rule, it's okay to be fumbling along. And this is why we've outsourced to experts, because we don't think it's okay to be fumbling along. And we've also lost that village of calling a mom friend who maybe is more seasoned, or calling our own mothers or our aunts to say, "Hey, did you experience this?" Or "I made this parenting decision. Was this the right thing to do?" And so I think it's ultimately okay for parents to make mistakes, because your kids, as long as you keep showing up and as long as you keep trying and you repair and you apologize for those mistakes and try to do better the next time, they'll survive it.
That is the most important piece of encouragement I think that you could have possibly said. And because it does feel like as a parent, and you're right, we don't call people as often. Actually, I saw a really horrendously sad commercial. I consider it so sad. And honestly, the commercial was like all upbeat and whatever, but it was from Samsung AI. And I think it was I believe it was a year ago summer that I was watching TV and just happened to catch as this college student is doing laundry. And it talks about, the commercial advertises how now you can talk to your phone and ask the questions about, what does this signal mean and what should I consider for doing my laundry? And all I could think was, that's a conversation you should be having with your mom, and how sad that is gone. And people may think like, oh, that's nothing, it doesn't mean anything, but we're going to talk about this a little bit more. But I want to start hammering home as a thread the idea again of taking back agency, which really the ways that you can take ownership of this stuff and adopt the analog life in a digital world, if you will. Because and it'll be things like that. Like, don't necessarily go for the easy thing. Actually, my daughter just did it before we started recording. She asked me, "Mom, do you think I should wash this? It looks like it might shrink. Should I pre-wash it before I do XYZ?" And honestly, I loved that she came and asked it. I literally thought that to myself. So anyway, Yes. I think that we need to get back to more of that.
Yes.
Okay. So this part of what I think is so, I don't know, maybe like foundational to this book for me was that you connect the actual physical and cognitive development, like the physical development to cognitive and social emotional development, which I don't know, I'm sure I've heard it before, but somehow it just never clicked until I read it. So you talk about the way that these development stages kind of ladder. Am I saying it? I always said
Yep.
the wrong.
Letter. Yeah.
They build on each other. Can you just give us a kind of an overview of those different stages?
Yeah. So it starts with movement. As young as infancy, babies have primitive reflexes, right? There's the rooting reflex where when you touch the side of their face, they're looking for something to eat. And these are ways that they survive. They're actually communicating with their caregivers and they're telling their caregivers what they need. And we are restricting movement even as young as infancy in two ways. We're putting them in these contraptions, these smart bassinet type devices, or contraptions to keep them what's considered safe, because convenience, parents are looking more for convenience these days, and they don't want to keep a close eye, and they don't want to rock their babies when they wake up. They want the bassinet to do it. And by restricting that movement, what's actually happening is their brain isn't developing. So movement scaffolds the brain for growth. And this is what people have a hard time with because we don't culturally understand child development. But it's a very important distinction to make because, again, as early as infancy and then like toddlers need to crawl and walk. And when they're a little bit older, be outside and climb trees and jump and skip and run. And that's because brain development is happening exponentially in the first 6 years. 90% of the brain is developed by age 6. So we really want to get them moving. And of course, if they're on a screen or the parents have them, like I said, in a contraption because they want to get something done and they want the convenience, then it's preventing from that development. And so what then happens is we see all these kids with sensory processing issues, right? We see speech issues. We see, and then, the letters, I call them the mental health disorders, ADHD and anxiety and all these things. And that's literally because their brains aren't getting what they need early on. And then they can't move into the next phase of development, which is social emotional development. So you can kind of think of it like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where we want their basic needs met before, then they go into the need for safety and the need for connection, and then eventually self-actualization. From a basic standpoint, if their brains can't develop, they can't develop socially, emotionally, which is why we're seeing so many kids with these quote unquote mental health issues. And I happen to think they're not mental health issues, they're a reaction to the environment.
So I know you're not done with it, but I just have to say, it felt like a light bulb moment to me, because it also, I think, makes a lot of sense that you have to have that foundation, just like you said, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It totally makes sense in so many ways. If you don't build it physically, we are physical beings. And so this idea that they wouldn't be connected, it was truly shocking. Also, I have to say, your story about the smart bassinet and the comment, I think you quote like there's a study that the smart bassinet is advertised as being or there's no difference between the comfort from the bassinet as the mom. And as a mom, that just cut me to the core.
Right.
I will disagree. Anyway, okay, please continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So then when, if they're getting what they need, movement wise, brain development wise, then that's where they can go through these stages of psychosocial development, which those are the stages that build on the one before it. So for example, infants from 0 to 18, they need to attach to their caregiver. So they cry, their caregiver responds, it cues the nervous system for safety. And then they can move into the next stage, which is will and authority, which is that terrible 2 age. Because if they felt safe, then they feel safe saying, no, I will not do it by myself. And then it can go into autonomy and independence if the parents respected that they wanted to do things by themselves. And then if the toddler respected the parent's authority when they say no. So 2 things are happening in the 2 phase. They want to say what their boundaries are, and they want the parents to respect their boundaries, and then we want them to respect their parents' authority. Then they can move into autonomy and independence from 3 to 5. This is where we really want to see a lot of like tying their shoes and getting themselves dressed and doing things for themselves, because that builds their sense of I'm capable and I have agency and I can do it. And ultimately, they need to work through that frustration tolerance to get to that point. And then very generally, a lot happens from 5 to 12, but very generally, they should be building their confidence, which comes from doing hard things, not from getting awards and trophies and participation trophies. Because then from 12 to 18, we want to see them building their identity, their sense of self, who they are. We're seeing a lot of identity issues and kids identifying with groups to feel like they belong, but they're being indoctrinated and not really connecting to who they really are. And then 18 to 25, which is the final phase, because 25 is the brain development completion. They're really ideally supposed to be engaging in connected, strong, healthy, intimate relationships. And what we see a lot of in Gen Z, which that's, that age group right now, is they're lonely, they're isolated, they're not really in intimate relationships. And they're dating, but mainly online. They're also using a lot of pornography because they lack that connection. And so, like from the very beginning, we really want them to be building those stages so that when they are the age that we expect them to be, getting married and having careers and figuring their life out, then they're ready for that. But what we're seeing is that they're not.
Oh my gosh. And it feels like a snowball. Honestly, it feels like they're, I mean, you talk about this too in the book, the idea, do we remember millennials and how no one could stand them when they went into the workforce, and they're nothing compared to this next generation? And that's so true because I remember hearing stories and talking in my office about parents going to job interviews with their kids. And I don't know, call me old school or whatever. I just feel like I feel like we didn't realize just how bad it was going to get, because everyone just was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, these people are idiots, but they'll grow out of it. It's going to be fine. I'm pretty certain that's what I felt, and not that it was going to get even worse. So that alone has been shocking. I want to touch on I had planned on talking about this later, but you mentioned it now, so I don't want to forget, frankly. The that we need to let our kids sit with discomfort. And one thing that really stood out to me as I was reading this is this idea of, and later in the book you talk about generational parenting, and the differences in parenting across the generations, which I don't feel like I've really seen a nice analysis of that before, so succinctly put. It feels like the modern parents something happened that we're afraid of discomfort, even though we felt plenty of discomfort. And so we don't want our kids to feel any discomfort. And it's just this like snowball effect of no discomfort. What happened there?
Yeah. So I think you're talking about Gen X, right? With their Gen Z kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Gen X is like 1965 to 1980.
Mhm.
And so for the most part, those are the parents of the current teenagers and young adults. And I think what happened is that we were raised, and because I'm Gen X, with this mentality of, go stay outside all day. We don't want to see you. We don't want to hear you. Go live in the world, go live your life, figure it out. We were the generation that was literally thrown in the deep end and expected to swim without any kind of, flotation device or, knowledge of how to swim. We just sort of had to figure it out. Right. And that's very generally the culture of parenting back then. Which I think in some cases was great, right? It encourages independence. It makes you find out what you're made of. I remember being out in my neighborhood with friends, and we would go explore. We would ride our bikes for miles. We would surprise ourselves how far we got and what we did. And we would find our way home. We used to get lost. We didn't have navigation. So in a lot of ways, that was really healthy for us. And we figured a lot of things out and we built our resilience. Where I think our parents went wrong was that when we came home, they didn't care what happened to us. They didn't want to hear about it. If we had a fight with a friend, that's not a problem. There are bigger problems in the world, right? We don't want to hear about how you feel. And that was very painful from an emotional standpoint for a lot of Gen Xers. So when they started to have kids, it became this overcompensating of what we didn't have. And that's why the first chapter of my book is called The Mirror, because when we see our kids, when we look at them, it's like we're looking in the mirror at ourselves, of what's unresolved, of what's missing. And we tend to swing too far into the other direction of whatever we had or didn't have, and we overcompensate. Because any little bit toward the middle feels like a threat to our nervous system and our safety.
That was a really interesting point that you made, that any little bit to the middle feels like a threat, because I think I've always tried to look at it. I've heard this idea of the mirror before, not exactly the concept, not called the mirror, but I remember talking about this as a young parent. The idea that anything you don't like in your children is something that you don't really like in yourself. That's more the phrasing that I heard. And so reading it through, or thinking about that as I was reading the book, it's okay, so that's things that are unresolved, things that may have bothered me or I may be upset about. And I think that makes a lot of sense because I didn't fully work through it, whatever it was. But I don't know, that was just so, it's funny, this idea then of going back to the middle at all, that part I hadn't heard before. So how do we avoid that? Because, and I'm going to be skipping around a little bit because of the conversation, but how do we avoid that? And how do we avoid feeling guilty about it? Now, maybe this is the first time people are hearing about that. And let's be real, mom guilt's a thing. So how do you avoid trying to work on this and not feel like you've completely destroyed your children?
Well, that's where the discomfort comes in, because we can't avoid guilt. And I don't say that to mean we should stay in guilt forever. We absolutely shouldn't. But it's a feeling, just like every other feeling, and it's going to come up and it's going to come and go, and we can't avoid it. So we have to be able to sit with that pain and discomfort of, again, like I said earlier, what mistakes we've made and what we've done that we maybe want to change, because we can't change it unless we acknowledge the pain of it. So that's where I think parents have to get a little more comfortable in the discomfort. And that's why, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry.
I was just going to say, that's how you get closer to the middle, because once you start to try to make those changes, change and growth is painful, and you're going to experience that, but not forever. So it's that concept of choose your hard. Choose the hard route of ignoring what's not resolved and keep overcompensating, because that's hard, even though you think you're taking the easy way out, because you're going to have problems from that. Or the hard route of, okay, hey, I'm going to make this change, this transformation. Yeah, it'll be painful, but it won't last. It won't be forever.
Yeah. That is exactly right. It's interesting because I was thinking, when you were saying before of parents need to sit in their discomfort, get comfortable being in the discomfort. When we've talked about that before, I think I thought of it more at the idea of being willing to stand up to your kids, and you're going to get yelled at or they're going to be angry at you. And I wasn't thinking about when you do realize that if there's been a mistake, and being comfortable with the fact there was a mistake, because we're human, we're going to make mistakes.
That's right. And it is what you're describing. It is in that context as well, because we had more authoritarian parents, as Gen Xers, and then Gen Xers have become too permissive in their parenting. And the most ideal form of parenting is called authoritative, and that's what's in the middle. So you have a little bit of that authoritarian, like there's going to be rules, there's going to be boundaries, expectations, accountability. But then you have on the other side a lot of love and high support. And so, yeah, go ahead.
In the book, you mention authoritative, which I think hopefully most parents probably strive to be, theoretically. But you actually call out that this concept that's gained a lot of traction called gentle parenting is a misinterpretation, is that what you call it, of authoritative parenting? Can you explain that?
Yes. So originally, it was supposed to be what we now consider authoritative parenting. It was this idea that we're going to be a little bit more gentle about our rules and our boundaries, but we're still going to have them. And then social media came along, and then parenting influencers came along who are very popular when they talk about being 100% gentle and not having rules and not having boundaries and letting your kids kind of, rule the roost in a sense and make their own choices. And so that's really what's gotten popular with the younger generation of parents. But it was never meant to be that way, because discipline is love. Holding your kids accountable is love. Giving them rules and boundaries is safety, because they're not ready to make their own decisions fully or be on their own. And sure, that looks different with a 3-year-old than it does with a 16-year-old. But nonetheless, they all, at all ages, need boundaries, just age appropriate ones.
Oh yeah. That one is really hard for me to fully wrap my head around, because I would never have considered myself a gentle parent. I think I was generally an authoritative parent. I am absolutely positive that I had moments that I handled things terribly. But the concept of not having rules for your kids, or I would see, clips or reels of, this, Johnny, how do you think Susie feels when you hit her? That's not how that's not how we express big feelings. Like, what are you talking about? It just never made any sense to me.
That's right.
But is that something you think that, are you starting to see a trend in it going the opposite direction? Well, because there isn't, there was a trend for a minute there. I think it was called like 90s parenting or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of different trends. They call it FAFO, which is F around to find out. And that's like the idea of natural consequences. So that falls under that category of authoritative parenting. But I actually think the trends are confusing parents even more, which is why we have this culture of outsourcing our authority and what we know to be, we're the experts and we're letting other people be the experts, because every few months there's a new trend. And then parents, I think, feel like, oh, well, maybe I need to start doing this, but they don't understand the context of the trend. So when that FAFO parenting came along, I was trying to kind of clear things up on my social media, or when I would speak to parents, and I would explain that, yeah, that's one facet of parenting that can be effective and healthy and have your kids learn. Natural consequences are great, but they're not always appropriate. And we certainly need to be careful of like the age of when we introduce that concept, right? So like, I live in Michigan, we live in a cold state. So one of the biggest examples is when your kid doesn't want to wear a coat in the winter. Yeah. And so it's like, you wouldn't let your 3-year-old go outside without a coat, right? You would say, no, it's not a choice, wear your coat. But you might let your 12-year-old go out without a coat, so that they experience this concept of, well, maybe I'm being resistant to my parents and I want to push back a little, but oh boy, I was freezing and I'm never going to do that again.
Yeah. And I think there too, I would caution from personal experience, there's a lot to be said about just letting your kids experience things like that and enjoying their lesson without rubbing their face in it. Because even if your family, like, I know we have a lot of sarcasm in my family and in my in-laws family, but that's not always appropriate. It can make the lesson be something that doesn't come across as well. It just becomes a challenge. But I think that's such a great example. That's the whole, like, touch a flame, right? Because a kid wants to touch it, or a light bulb or whatever, and they have to. You wouldn't let an infant do that, but you might let an older child, like, oh, you think it's not hot? Okay, well, I promise you it is.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that. Don't rub their noses into it, because they need to learn. And that's normal for them to be pushing back, because they're trying to figure out, like, hey, what can I get away with? How much independence can I have?
Yeah. And we all make mistakes. I mean, just even as an adult, like, we're still growing, hopefully. So, and when you learn something, I know when I learn something, I don't necessarily want someone being like, see, I told you so. So yeah. So this comes back to looping it back to where I totally took us off on a side trail. We were talking about the development, the actual development, brain development of our children. So would you say with all these trends that happen and outsourcing our expertise and authority, if you will, is it possible, because it feels like it, that we are almost expecting our kids to be more emotionally and socially mature before they are actually even physically developmentally ready to be that? Is that possible?
Absolutely. And I think that's where technology comes in
Mm,
because we think it's okay to introduce them to, you know, the internet that has the gamut of content that they're not ready for. And they are getting exposed to things way beyond their maturity level way too soon. And I think parents don't always know that there's dangers. But some parents think that parental controls are enough to prevent those dangers. And
I was one.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's such a nice way to think that you can have tech in your family and have it be what you want it to be. But as we now know, the parental controls aren't really enough. Kids are smarter than we are. They know how to get around them. Hackers are smarter than parents and the controls. And so, yeah, I think we've learned a lot, which is a good
So
thing.
in addition to the exposure, which my kids will still tell you, I'm actually proud of this. They will all say that I was a very strict parent. I'm like, good. I wasn't strict enough in some spots, but that's okay. So there's actual ways that you discuss that technology truly affects development, like the cognitive and physical development of our kids. Can you talk about what that looks like?
So even just the stimulation from the screen, the blue light, it enters into the nervous system, and the nervous system reads it as like a fight or flight, threatening, kind of stressful situation. And so a lot of kids are set up early on for that stress response, that feeling of anxiety. Is why we're seeing so much anxiety, because just the stimulation alone from it is causing that. It's making it really hard for kids to rest and digest and imagine and play and create and wonder and do all those things that we did because we had the experience of boredom. And I always say, like, even mindfulness, we shouldn't even need to introduce it to kids because if they had boredom, they would be mindful. It would just be a natural experience for them. So,
Unpack that a little bit, because I think that is actually a great example of how we think things that are appropriate for an adult, right? Like we get the concept of being mindful of your present situation, but what would that look like given if kids had boredom instead?
yeah, I think they would just naturally be mindful because they would be able to go into that part of their brain that can focus and that can imagine and create and think about things. Whereas when they're constantly stimulated by a screen and they're in fight or flight, then they can't experience that calmness. So even if we did say, okay, screens away, time to meditate, which a lot of schools are doing now, actually, they're still in fight or flight and their nervous system is buzzing, and that mindfulness or meditation is actually feeling like a threat because they can't calm.
That's really an interesting point.
Mhm.
Okay, so another thing that we talk about too, by the way, is you're talking about being to put these restrictions in place, to encouraging that. But we've all experienced it. It is incredibly difficult when your kid wants something that everybody else is doing, because even though now we're seeing a great movement of technology being removed from schools, which is very encouraging, there's a huge swing in that for that, which I'm very, very relieved to see. But I don't get the same feeling at home. I feel like there is still this idea, and I'm gonna give you a quick story, which, and I'm hoping you can give me give our parents some ideas of ways to talk, possibly even in public, about this. So I was at a restaurant. It was during the World Cup, and I was sitting and watching the game, and this family came in and sat next to us, and I don't know how old the daughter was. She couldn't have been that old. She must have been tall for her age, because I thought at first maybe like 10 or 12 or something. But when she spoke, she sounded younger. So I have no idea, never met this kid. So I'm going to assume, based on the sound of her voice, that she was actually maybe like 7 or 8. And they sit down, she puts on a screen, some sort of a tablet, and watches it the entire time. Now, of course, I'm watching the World Cup on TV, so I get it. I also have a screen, but this is, a little bit very specific example or thing that we're watching, not just zoning away. So as I'm listening, and I mean, how can you not in a restaurant? I'm not trying to overhear, but the daughter starts kind of scrolling, and I hear mom lean over and very specifically say, no, don't look at the comments. You don't need to, or don't look at those. You don't need to see that. And her daughter pushes back and says something, and I couldn't tell. And her mom pointed out, no, you don't need to look at the comments, because people just say all sorts of nasty things. And so clearly she's on social media, and she's so young. And I desperately wanted to lean over and say, good job. Start there. Now do more. What can parents do when confronted with this? Not necessarily in public. I understand not everyone's going to want to step forward and say something, but even in their own personal lives, if their friends or family or whoever pushes back and tries to give technology, what can parents do to try to push back?
I think this is a really good time to be able to say, hey, have you read this book? Or, hey, have you seen this news story or this research study that I just learned about? Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation is everywhere. If you haven't heard of it, you must be living under a rock. So maybe you've heard of it, you didn't buy it. Maybe you bought it, you haven't read it yet. But this is a great time for parents to be able to say to their friends or their family members, hey, I read this really good book, or I heard about this really good book. You should take a look at it. We've actually learned quite a bit about technology now, and it's important us parents educate ourselves.
Yeah. Would you encourage talking to just random strangers about it, or would you say maybe that's not the best idea?
Oh, you're speaking my language. It's the hardest thing in the world for me to be in public and see these things. And I don't say anything because I think in that kind of a context, the person probably is just going to feel judged and shut it down anyway. And so what I try and do is send a blessing, say a prayer, hope that eventually the information will just be even more mainstream than it already is now. But yes, it breaks my heart. I mean, I can tell you 1,000 stories like the one you just told me. But I just had a most recent experience actually last week in the grocery store that just broke my heart. It was a girl that had to be at least 12, maybe 13. So she was older, and she didn't need, not that any kid needs entertainment in public. I don't believe that at all. But I could see a little bit of like rambunctious toddler, maybe, that you want to keep calm during your grocery store run. But this was an old enough kid to not need to be entertained for the 10 minutes this family was in the store. And she had an iPad that was like literally strapped to her like a purse strap, which I'd never seen before. The strap was attached to the covering of the iPad, and it was playing out loud very loudly, like the entire store could hear it. And then I happened to be in the checkout line at the same time as them, and the girl kept inching towards me, and I wasn't finished checking out. You could tell she just had no spatial awareness whatsoever. And the mom finally said, oh, hey, this lady isn't done checking out. You need to back up. But I'm thinking, take the iPad away so she can pay attention, right? But I got a close enough look to what she was doing, and she was clearly scrolling YouTube shorts, just scrolling, and it was playing out loud. And a lot of it was very inappropriate. So I just was, I've seen so many things like you're describing, but that one kind of takes the cake because she was older.
All right, then I don't feel quite so bad for not talking out, because I'm not gonna lie, I cannot tell you how much of an internal struggle it was for that entire game to be like, oh, don't say something. And I'm not afraid of confrontation, but I really didn't want the parent to feel judged, which is why I didn't do that. But man, I do hope this knowledge gets out there more. So that slightly touches on the next question that I think is related, which is, we as adults need to model good technology habits. There's an old phrase I've heard, and I'm sure you have as well, that what is caught is greater than what is taught. And so you can, and the whole, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing is sort of maybe the opposite. But sometimes parents struggle with this. And I'm not saying that we can't ever have technology. That's, while technically feasible, that is probably not realistic for most people. So one of the biggest problems might come up, though, if parents aren't necessarily in alignment about the idea of modeling good technology habits. What do you recommend to help parents if only one of the parent is open to modeling good technology behavior?
So I like to think of this as like a family value or a family system. And families have all kinds of ways that they operate. Maybe it's culturally, maybe they have a certain religion, maybe they go to church every Sunday, and the family culture is revolved around that value system. So technology can be under that category of what is your family value around your use of technology. And that can be a family discussion. That can be a discussion between just the mom and the dad. But essentially, the mom and the dad are the leaders of the family, and they're responsible for how that value system gets communicated and gets enforced. So what that could look like is there's just a strict rule. We do this in my house: no phones at the dinner table. It's just a very strict rule. And whenever we're all together, we all respect that. And sometimes we might like get a phone out for a specific purpose, but then inevitably somebody, we're sarcastic like your family, somebody's like, oh, no phones at the table. So and I also suggest people, you mentioned you had like that charging tower in your kitchen. Like there should be a place where phones get checked in at certain times, especially at night. There should be no phones in the bedrooms at night. And that goes for the parents too. So these are some basic things, but once you've developed this idea of, yeah, we have a value system around technology, you start to become more aware of it. So I can get very, into my work, and I can kind of lose track of time, and I could be in front of a computer or my phone. But what I really try and do is if anyone walks into the room I'm in and I'm on a piece of tech, I make sure I put it down. And if I can't put it down because maybe I'm in the middle of something and I don't want to lose my thought, I do pause and say, hey, I'm going to finish this up, and then I want to talk to you.
That right there, I think, is one of the most important things that I would encourage for parents to teach their kids. And that's something I'm not perfect at it, but I do really, really make that effort as well, because I work from home most of the time. So it's very easy for, especially in the summertime or after school, my kids would come in and try to talk to me. And so I would always make it a point to try to not just put it down, but like turn and look at them so that I was not even possibly distracted. And I don't know if they always notice it. I think that in the end, like now at this age, they do, because my kids are older now. But I notice myself, and this is something you've discussed it. I believe it's in Jonathan Haidt's book as well. The idea of the distraction of a phone, if it's out, if you're having a conversation with someone and you have it out, even if it's screen up or versus screen down, the difference that it creates in that feeling of whether or not the other person is paying attention, which is pretty incredible in my opinion. So I think that that's such a good habit to focus on.
Yeah.
You mentioned systems. That's actually not technically the next question related in the way to the next question I want to ask, but it's a perfect segue. So we're going to move into it. So you further on in the book talk a little bit about, or you discuss families working as a system and the concept of triangulation. So I think this is really important because I want you to unpack what that means, but also pull in maybe the idea of where parents aren't, and maybe we skipped over too much, where parents maybe are putting the bad kid in therapy, which is such an awful thing to say, but they're putting all the problem on the child, expecting that child to fix it when they go to therapy, when there's something else that needs fixed.
Yes. So the family works like an assembly line. So the system is functional or dysfunctional based on each person's role in the system. So most families have a scapegoated child or a scapegoated family member, somebody who is the most sensitive to the dysfunction or to the system going awry. And that person that's the most sensitive is going to exhibit behavioral issues, mental health issues. They'll likely be resistant, they'll be difficult. And so then the focus becomes on their behavior, and the parents try to control that as opposed to trying to control their role in the assembly line. And as we all know, on the assembly line, you can't control anybody else's part except your own. And we all want to, right? It's a lot easier to look at the person next to you on the line and say, "Oh, you're doing that wrong. Let me fix it for you."
Yep.
But we do it. It's part of human nature. And
Yeah.
and I've done it too. And I talk about in the book, like how I've
Mhm.
made parenting mistakes because of it. So what I always encourage people to do is look at themselves. What is your role? What is the part you play? What do you have power and control over? And then change that. Because the second one person, and that's all it takes, it should, I mean, everybody should be working on it. Okay. But if nobody else is going to work on it, all it takes is you changing your role in the system, and then the system is forced to change. It cannot absolutely positively go on the way that it is. Does it mean that it's going to function the way you want it to? No, but you've just taken the first step to make sure that it can.
Yeah.
And then everybody on the system gets to decide, hey, she's changing her part, he's changing his. What am I going to do with that? Am I going to react well to that? Am I going to resist that? Am I going to leave the family? But that's up to them, and we can't control that. So all we can do is control us and our part. And that's where that triangulation comes in, because the triangle is this idea that your side of the triangle with whoever you're in the relationship with is your responsibility. But on that third side of the triangle, say it's, you, your husband, and one of your daughters, that relationship between him and your daughter is not up to you and not something you can control. Can you show up for both of them? Yes. But you cannot control what the other one does.
So being transparent here, I can say that, right? That just, I felt like, I don't know, lay me bare when I read this book, that part, I think in particular, because one of my biggest struggles that I've only recently discovered or really identified maybe is this desire to, and I guess it's a control thing in reality, but it's this desire that I can run interference almost in between the relationships of people that I care about, that I don't want this person A or to say or do something that's going to hurt person B's feelings. So I'm going to like run interference between there and try to make everything work. And then they end up just getting mad at me anyway. Am I correctly interpreting that as triangulation? Is that appropriate version of that?
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. And we do that. I've done that too. We do that to avoid our own pain and discomfort of person A and person B having a hard time and struggling, because then we fear, oh no, if they don't have a good relationship, what does that mean for me? So we try to control it.
Oh, yeah. Boy, hitting to the core.
Oh, I know. It's deep stuff.
It is. It really is. But also, again, it's so encouraging. And actually, that's what I want to pause real quick and say to people, that because I struggled with this. I mean, you can even ask Terry. We were talking about it the first time I was reading the book, and I was like, I gotta be honest, there are some things that are just making me like, I am really struggling with this. And part of it was that discomfort of, what have I recognizing, we all do things wrong, and I could have done this better. I really thought I did that right, but I think this was maybe the end result that didn't work out so well. And I definitely am a perfectionist. So I want to encourage people, what you said in the very beginning, that it's okay to figure our way through this. Like we don't have to be perfect. Because there almost was a bit of a feeling for me, like, how could any parent do all these right things? It's only the experts that are going to know. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, I think that there's a lot of instinct that we have. And I believe that that's the message I got in the book, is that we know a lot more than we think we know.
Yes.
And we can get it through our village. Reach out, build those connections. So I just wanted to pause real quick to say that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So we're coming up on time, and I wanted to make sure that I left enough time to discuss what I think is just a really important um, expert opinion. I'm going to leave it to that, though. And it's guidance for what technology could look like at every age of our children's life. And so I really want to take a minute to unpack each of those and what parent, just to help empower parents, because it is pretty darn hard to be in this world with absolutely zero technology. And for moms and our members, I imagine if anyone talks to friends about this, I actually had a friend who had even, let's see, it was in February, we were having this conversation. I was talking about the cognitive decline that we've seen. That is a real thing, that this is the first generation that is literally not as smart as their parents, which is just wild. And if for no other reason, keep your kids off of tech for that. And they pushed back with things like, oh, a common response of, oh, so you're going to keep them totally off of technology, and then they're going to get to college and just go crazy, as if, I don't know, like they can't control it, whatever. Anyway, so let's talk about the different guidelines that you're recommending for age group and the developmental side, I guess, that goes into that.
Yeah. So to that point, when people say, I'll just start with that. When people say, oh, give it to them young so they don't go crazy when they're older, they don't know how to use it. What's missing in that conversation is that we don't give kids drugs or alcohol or things that are highly addictive when they're young, because we understand that they need to develop first. We want to see their brains fully develop before we introduce substances that are brain altering. And we have to look at tech that way. It's a substance that's brain altering. And it doesn't just alter the brain, it alters the body. It alters like feeling about yourself. It alters your mental health. So that's just very foundational. But I recommend, and before I even give recommendations, I tell parents, again, you know your kid better than I do, right? So I give a guideline, but you're going to know if your kid is ready for something or not, even if it's the age that I say, oh, it would be okay. Like, for example, my oldest was not ready for a smart device, even when I suggest that kids can have a smart device. And so we had to wait a whole nother year because he was ready. So from 0 to 5, I really don't recommend anything for kids. They absolutely should not have their own personal iPads. I know this is so common. We see them everywhere. We see even the protective case with their favorite color. They're made literally for kids. I call them just a sidekick to childhood. They're like an accessory. And so I don't want to see any iPads before 5. If you want to have any kind of tech from 3 to 5, I think like a family movie, would be appropriate. They can be in a central location with you. You know what they're watching. You've approved the content, and it's a shared experience. You do it together. And then from 5 to 9, I think a little bit of like if they want to watch a tutorial to learn how to draw something, or if they maybe want to get into a show, a program, I think that's okay, but obviously it needs to be limited. So I think no more than an hour and a half a day in that age range. And if they are on, like, say, an iPad or some kind of internet tool because they are watching a tutorial or they're watching a video, they should absolutely be supervised. Like the parent should literally be with them, because again, we can't trust parental controls, and we can't trust that big tech has our kids' safety in mind. And so from 9 to 12, this is, I think, probably the hardest time to navigate tech in that middle childhood, middle school years, because they are absolutely not ready for smart devices. But so many of them are getting smart devices that then if your kid doesn't have one, they feel left out. They're socially isolated. They don't know what's happening. They can't keep in touch with their friends. So here's where I suggest a couple of different creative tools. We've got some now tech companies who are creating what's considered safe tech. And, we have like Gab and Gizmo and Pinwheel, and they have these devices where there's no internet, there's no social media, but they can do talk and text. And a lot of these companies have a lot of control for the parent. The parent controls the contacts. They approve everything. They get all the messages. They see everything. Now, if you ask me, That's way too much work. I don't want to be hovering and monitoring. So that's just practical, too much work. But then from like the parent-child emotional like connection, that's also not very appropriate, because this is a time, middle childhood, where we want to actually be giving them a lot of independence. So I say that if they want to keep in touch with their friends, a watch is a great way to do that, like a Gab watch or some kind of watch where they don't have internet or any kind of apps. It's literally just talk and text. You can put contacts, you can control the contacts, and there's not much trouble they can get into with those watches. And they can also learn tools. This is a great time for them to learn how to call a friend, how to knock on a door, how to make plans when they actually see their friends. Maybe there's a school event and they say, hey, what are you doing next weekend? And they gain those skills of communication and planning and figuring that out. And then 12 to 14, that's a little gray area where maybe they could have like a Gab phone and not a watch, where it's, a little bit more, gives them a little bit more freedom to make plans with their friends. But again, no internet and no social media. And then 14 to 18, I think it's okay to introduce a smart device, but no social media. I don't think anyone under 18 has any business on social media. And what I also think we need to be doing in those high school years is helping them learn how to use it appropriately, if at all. So I don't think there's any benefit to it unless you have a message you want to get out to a lot of people, unless you have a business that you're trying to market, unless you're trying to target a certain group of people because you have a problem to solve. And this is what we should be talking to them about in those high school years of when you do get on tech, here's how you should be using it. They should all learn how to use LinkedIn before they graduate high school, because that's how people are getting jobs now. There's no more like go online and fill out an application and submit it. You have to be learning how to connect with people on LinkedIn and, getting your network built. So I can't tell you how many young adults I counseled over the years who were on social media as young as middle school, and then they graduated and they're like, well, how do I post things, or how do I use LinkedIn? And I thought, what do you mean you don't know? Like, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so appreciative of the tips. And it's really funny to me because reading through this, first of all, the first one that made me go, whoa, was the idea of a family movie night, not until the ages of 3 to 5. Cause I can 100% say, I know, I remember Baby Einstein, and I bought the lie that, oh, it's, educational for my little bitty baby. Like they need a screen.
Yep.
Nope. And so mom guilt check number 1,
I had that same mom guilt, by the way, because I didn't know about this stuff when my 17-year-old was a baby. So same thing. I bought the lie too. Yeah.
Well, and I love that there's so much tech now that it's realistic, I think. Like it gives us the opportunity to live in a digital world and not feel like complete lunatics, because the other thing that parents need to really be aware of is that you can have, like, talk about a village. You need to find your people, because if your kids are going around other kids that have these smart devices, guess what they're going to see? I mean, we would have kids over. I was that mom that would be like, all right, put your phones down. Like, you guys didn't get together to just sit and stare on the phone and watch everyone play Minecraft or whatever it was, and go outside and play. Like, I'm sorry, you cannot have your phone, period. Deal with it. And it was a battle. It was such a battle. And that was back then. Now I feel like it's so much harder. But I love these guidelines. It does make me kind of laugh, because I thought, oh God, these are coming from an expert. But you even say that in there. You're like, these are yours, your kids, like you know them best. And so I cannot recommend your book highly enough. Before I gush even more, because I think that literally every parent needs to read this. Anyone who wants to be a parent, everyone who thinks about being a parent, anyone who knows a parent should probably read this. So basically it's everybody. That said, Any final takeaways, anything we didn't get to talk about, which is, a ton. So any final takeaways that we didn't get to cover?
I think just hammering it home for people that it's all about connection. So your bond and your connection with your kids is so much more powerful than any outside influence. And this is a time in our lives where we really want to have more influence on our kids than the culture does, because we don't have that village anymore where we can trust that they're going out there and they're getting the same message that we give them at home. So just stay connected as best as you can. And that can be very simple. I think a lot of parents think, I call it a Disney day. Like they have to, make this pomp and circumstance around spending time with their kids and make all these plans and do fun things. And it can be as simple as running errands together, cooking a meal together, gardening, doing laundry, whatever it is you, the parent, has to get done, your kid can do that parallel to you, and you can talk and connect and, have that nervous system co-regulation, calmness happening. And that just goes so far. It's so powerful and it's so simple.
Yeah, it is. So don't underestimate how valuable that connection is that you can have with your kids. That is, thank you so much for joining us. Seriously, I can't thank you enough. I am 100% sure we're going to bring you back, because as you were talking about that, I thought, we didn't even get to talk about empathy. And I really wanted to talk about empathy, but we'll come back to that. So tell everyone where they can find you and get your book.
So I'm at NicoleRunyon.com. There's a tab called My Book. They can order it through there. I'm on Instagram at iGeneration Mental Health and LinkedIn as Nicole Runyon.
And you have a discussion guide as well, or a kit that you mentioned too, right? So if they get the book, then they can have access to tools that you have put together for parents as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here.
Thank you. It's been lovely.
Oh my goodness. I could talk to Nicole all day. Trust me on this. If you haven't gotten her book yet, I am telling you, it is so worth it. If you're a parent, if you know a parent, if you want to be a parent, heck, if you know someone who has a parent, this book is for you. Because a parental rights advocate becomes so much more powerful with the knowledge that she shares, not to mention the reminder that the parental authority that we've lost or maybe been convinced to give away, it really does belong to us, the parents. And she provides real, actual strategies that you can use today to get it back. If you like this episode, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss a single one. And then share this with a friend, another mom or dad, or even your mom and dad, because we need to bring agency back to advocacy. And it starts with parents reclaiming their authority and responsibility. That'll be it for today. Class dismissed.